if there's one thing that anime is, it's definitely weird. Now, in many ways, that can be kind of a problem, but in other ways, it is one of the most charming aspects when it comes to the anime industry. To the insane fever dream that is Bobobo, to the weird masochistic feeling that is Kagegiri, to the mindfuckery that is Fooly Cooly, to the degeneracy that is Prison School, anime as a medium and its memorable shows will also be some of the weirdest you will ever see put to pen and paper, and by golly, I will stand by for that fact. It is a beautiful mess sometimes. And one anime that is put perfectly into that spot, one anime that is the prime example of this, is in fact Panty and Stocking, for all the good and all the bad. Back in around 2010, Panty and Stocking was made by Studio Ginax, the now defunct studio that would have its successor in Trigger Studios. Yes, of course I'm going to use this to mention Trigger. Who do you think I am? It was a project that truly just pushed the boundaries of what vulgarity and degeneracy could really be in anime, and trust me, it definitely found its fan base. But it also came out at an interesting time where I feel like anime was dwindling. Panty and Stocking came between the time of the late 90s to early 2000s boom of everybody trying to bring over anime to the West, to the slow trickle of 2018-2019 that would lead into the massive boom of 2020. You know, things happened that year. So anime wasn't necessarily this anomaly that existed, but it was definitely a very, very niche thing. More niche than how anime is now in 2026. So when I heard the announcement that Trigger Studios was actually going to bring back that project, the Panty and Stocking, I was definitely a little worried. And I wasn't the only one. There were other people that were definitely worried about how this project for Panty and Stocking coming back would inevitably be changed in the new climate that is the anime community. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there were some people that were very, very weird about it. I'm not one of those people, but I will admit that there is a lot of vulgarity and violence and just over-the-top things that people might be okay with, that I kind of like the Panty and Stocking. But it also wasn't just the climate for the anime community, it was also just the fact of bringing anything back 15 years later, you're always going to be a little worried about how that project could turn out. Especially in this era of anime where we have seen many anime come back from very long hiatuses that have been both good and not so great. And after watching it and sitting with it for a bit, yeah, not only was the new season of Panty and Stocking actually really good, but it was probably the best that it could have been. Panty and Stocking definitely came with the vulgarity and the excitement that it always had. In fact, in some cases even doing better than in previous seasons, or rather season to correct myself. It was still able to be cheeky and playful in many fun ways, and I appreciate the fact that they still kept it that. It is also great to keep establishing the fact that Panty and Stocking are not good people. It does at least help with the consumption of the show. But I do like the little extra additions that they did add in the show. Having the Devil Sisters interact a lot more with Panty and Stocking, and even living with them, was actually a really nice change to pace. It actually gives a nice different cohesion between the sisters, as Panty and Stocking are constantly fighting, but the Devil Sisters are actually pretty friendly with each other. Then there's Polyester and Polyurethane, who are very nice foils for Panty and Stocking and the Demon Sisters to actually interact with each other and actually unite to, kick some ass. And they do go also very hard on the creativity with this show. One episode that always comes to mind is the episode where the alien comes and everyone's drawn in like the 80s style, comic book style. Everyone's this big bulky person, and it's typical 80s action flick stuff, and I love it so much how hard they actually go on that. And that's not the only time they do it. Trigger Studios goes really hard on a lot of the animation for this, but then also again, it's Trigger Studios. What were you expecting? And for a show like this to go pretty untouched, I was actually kind of surprised. Sure, there were certain instances that happened, like the bitch episode where Panty says bitch constantly, and the Devil Sister, Loki revealing her age, which is not great. But for the most part, Panty and Stocking went unscathed, and I'm a little surprised by that. Sure, there is a rise of quality, definitely, but overall, Panty and Stocking is more or less untouched from the quality that they had back in 2010. And I think there is actually a particular reason for that, but in order to properly explain it, we do kind of have to pivot to another show that's very similar, was brought up in many comparisons, and I think will exemplify why I think Panty and Stocking didn't get much flack, unlike this particular show. Husband and Tell and Hell of a Boss are two shows where if you watch anime and you've been on the internet, you know exactly what these shows are. If you know exactly what these shows are, then you're probably in two particular camps in it. Either you think they're one of the more positive things that come out of the indie animation scene, or they're one of the more negative. Now, I will admit I am on the more positive side of the camp, but at least the things that I've seen from the negative, a lot of the contention that I've seen when it comes to stuff like Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel is the fact that the stories that they're trying to tell are actually impactful and somewhat meaningful, but can get muddied and sometimes lost among the crudeness that both shows display. And it's not the fact that people don't want them to explore that type of thing, in fact they actually do. But when it comes at the cost of either trying to make jokes or doing all that stuff, it can be harmful to the actual material that you're talking about. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of understand what they mean by that point. Balance is always a hard thing to do when you're juggling two different aspects of telling a story. And with something like Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, balancing crudeness, vulgarity, and sexual aspects with explorations on trauma and mental health and other very serious topics, yeah, it can be kind of hard to take that latter half of stuff very seriously when the former half of stuff is in the way. Now, I will admit, I am on the positive side of things, where I think that for the most part, VTubing does actually do a really good job balancing a lot of the crudeness with a lot of the serious stuff that they talk about within their show. But there is no denying the fact of when you try to have those balances, you are essentially attracting two different audiences. The audience that just wants to hear the jokes, the crude stuff, and just the palette of having those stuff is really nice, but for the people that want the emotional aspect, they can somewhat be put off by the crudeness. Sure, it's easy to just go ahead and tell people, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. And to an extent, that's somewhat fair, but I think it is a shame for the people who actually want a story to get that and just be put off by all the crudeness. At the end of the day, when it comes to stuff like Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, you can't please everybody. You're going to do the best that you can, and you're going to try to put on the best product that can appeal to both, even though some people may not like it. Now, going off of that side tangent, you're probably looking at this video and asking yourself, Mise, what the fuck does Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss have to do with the video that you're talking about, which is Panty and Stalking? Well, my good friend, the reason why I bring that up, and I think is a prime example in comparison, is because Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, you could argue, is a show that a lot of people might not look fondly of due to the fact that it's balancing those two things. Panty and Stalking wears what it is on its shoulder. It is a crude and vulgar show that is going to give you no real depth or substance when it comes to actual storytelling, but if you want a good laugh and cool animations, then go right ahead. While Has Been Hotel is a show that tries to do balance, Panty and Stalking is a show that just doubles its heels down on all the crazy stuff that it's done for its entirety. The crudeness, the vulgarity, the sexual aspect, the swearing, the action, the animation, all of it is simplistic and fun in its own right and doesn't try to stray out the boundaries or be something profound. And before you get on me, no, that is not a dig on Has Been Hotel, Hell of a Boss, or anything that VTubing worked on. I actually like a lot of the stuff that VTubing has worked on, but you can't deny the fact that a show that will appeal to one person rather than multiple people is probably going to do better in this sense. Where a show that is crude and vulgar, and you know that it's vulgar, and the people that watch it or seek it out know that it's vulgar, are going to tend to not want to consume it and just leave it alone. While it shows, like Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, that do offer multiple things to multiple people, are going to have issues when there are things in there that they might not like, but things that they do like that are in the show. I am not expecting somebody that wants good deep writing, good character development, and a fleshed out world that affects everybody around them in a way that is so detailed that you could write a whole separate book about it. You're not going to go and watch that for Panty and Stalking, but you might for Has Been Hotel, and you just might for Hell of a Boss. I mean, Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss are both in the same universe, quite literally, so it makes, sense. Honestly, when I look at it from just a few months later, Panty and Stalking is a show that realistically we shouldn't have really been worried about. It is a show that appeals to a certain type of person, and that certain type of person is definitely going to like it regardless. And the people who aren't going to watch it are just going to ignore it, and that's fine. Not everything has to be made for you, and that's perfectly okay. And for an anime, after 15 years to come back and still just be high quality, yeah, that's genuinely really impressive. Not only being able to keep that level of quality, but also add on top of it through their animation, just little details, adding new characters to making things seem fresh. Again, It's simple in that regard, but it is very effective in the way that they do it, and is really impressive. I myself am just very happy that Panty and Stalking was able to go through this unscathed. Will I? That has yet to really be determined.
I'm like so gay.